OTAs happening around the NFL, phase 3 of the offseason, which means players are on the field. Some players, though, absent from these voluntary organized team activities. Notes from around the NFL coming at you right now on Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thank you so much, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we love it. We appreciate it. Helps us out tremendously. When you hit subscribe, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell on YouTube. Of course, you can subscribe everywhere you listen to your podcast. Today's episode of P&W is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. All right, we're talking OTAs. I think there's a lot to be gained. I think there's some fluff stories out there as well. I want to start, though, Matt, with the umbrella of holdouts. And just because you're not at OTAs doesn't mean you're holding out. I saw locally with the 49ers, there is one guy that is holding out, and it is Brandon Aiyuk, and he's not going to show up until he gets a contract. And another couple of guys aren't there. Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey. I saw somebody write an article, or it was a headline that Christian McCaffrey holding out from OTAs. He's not holding out. Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, a lot of veterans around the league. We addressed this on the mailbag episode yesterday. There's certain veterans, bubble wrap them. I don't care if Trent Williams or Christian McCaffrey takes a single practice snap. Week 1, have them healthy and on the football field. T. Higgins, a big one with the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, he's got the franchise tag. Potential for trade in some of these scenarios is my question, Matt, because I don't think so with the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk. Another wide receiver, though, who has not – there's an underrated story if you want one out of San Francisco, Matt. Juwan Jennings, a big slot type of a player. He could be available for somebody. The Niners drafted 2 wide receivers. They have to pay Brandon Aiyuk. They still have Deebo Samuel, who might be a 2025 conversation, in my opinion. And there's not a lot of snaps left over. It's not a high-volume passing game anyway. Juwan Jennings, who was a 7th-round player and then was waived actually at one point, brought back. He's been doing the restricted free agent thing for a while now. And so he had a 2nd-round restricted free agent tender this offseason. He hasn't signed that tender, and he is not at OTAs. That's a holdout. He's trying to send a message. He's trying to get himself a contract, but there might not be enough snaps for everybody. A sneaky trade candidate potentially at wide receiver if a team's looking for a bigger slot type of a player. This is a guy who blocks his butt off and is almost a potential tight end in some ways, the way he plays the game. Juwan Jennings is an interesting name that could be available out there. And I think that is actually a true holdout and an underrated story coming out of San Francisco. And of course, T. Higgins is one of the big ones that I think everyone seems like they're okay with playing things out, but there is definitely a holdout watch. And some of these players, until they get their contract situations figured out, they're for sure not going to show up to voluntary camps.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And of course, remember, these are voluntary. I mean, so if people don't show up, they don't have to. I mean, they don't get fined. There's none of that type of thing going on. I want to start with T. Higgins because, frankly, the Bengals are the hardest team in the league to trade with. Hendrickson and Higgins have said they're interested in trades. That doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination they're even going to answer the phones on that. As for Higgins, though, he has not signed his franchise tag. So he can't even show up. He's not a football player at the moment. He does not have a contract.
So even when it's mandatory, he can't even be fined because he's not under contract because he hasn't signed that. They
can't do anything to him. Right. Yeah. He is not a Cincinnati Bengal. He doesn't belong to anybody. I mean, obviously they have his rights, but he is unemployed. I mean, he's like me and you. I mean, like he is not a football player at the moment. So at some point he'll sign it. There's no rush for the player to do that, to get the OTAs. And I don't think he'll get moved, especially because the draft has already come and gone. And I could have seen Cincy moving him for somebody that would help them win now. But the Bengals and Niners are kind of in the same boat to me, where they want to meet in the Super Bowl. I mean, I can't be affording to lose Debo and Higgins this year. I mean, maybe in the offseason when I can prepare for it more. And I'm glad you brought up Jennings, because this isn't just a Steeler thing. There's a lot of teams that could use another receiver. But trust me, we talk about every potential receiver on the planet here to put someone next to George Pickens. And the names I keep bringing up that nobody gets excited about, and I understand that because you don't have them in your fantasy league, are Darius Slayton and Jennings, both of whom are not in their camps right now, and both of whom use first-round picks on receivers. You know, like, I think you could get those guys pretty cheap.
Yeah, and those are players that can contribute to a
they're good players.
Get open and catch first downs, and maybe they're not, and who knows, maybe become more fantasy viable on a team with more targets that are available than their current situations. And T. Higgins, by the way, so there is a date. July 15th is the date for the Bengals and T. Higgins to figure out that contract extension and get something negotiated. And if nothing's figured out by July 15th, then you can't even sign the multi-year extension anymore. You are completely confined to that 1 year franchise or 1 year contract. And you can figure out something else that's not the franchise tag, but you can't do the multi-year deal anymore as part of the franchise tag after July 15th. So camp, he'll be there. If they don't trade him away, just because you know it's going to be a 1 year deal. But at some point,
can I stop you super quick? Because I never quite understood the logic of why that's in the CBA. Like, okay, what did you say? July 15th is the magic date, right? Yeah. It comes and goes. So let's say the Bengals are 10-0 and Higgins couldn't be happier. Couldn't he walk into Mr. Brown's office and say, let's make a deal for $15 million a year. I never want to leave. You know, we just won't tell anyone. You know?
Another time that it changes again mid-season.
Yeah.
I think
why bother?
I think it's like a post. I don't know if it lines up necessarily with the trade deadline, but I do think there is something that, because I think it's more about like the accrued season. I think is part of it. So once you accrue that season and those dates pass, then now you're on to a new conversation and you're doing something for a future year. And I think it's more. It had to be put in there as something that triggers so a player, it's less likely for the player to hold out because you can't help yourself anymore. You can't get a multi-year extension, so why keep holding out?
I guess my point is, why is there ever a time you can't sign a multi-year extension? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. No,
the player wants to do it, the team wants to do it. Let's sign an extension. You know, like, why is there ever a time I can't?
It's why it's so difficult, Matt, for you and I. Like, we follow the league as close as you can. It's like, you got to be a lawyer to dig through this CBA. And I every offseason, I'm like, what's the rule on this? And then stuff changed during the pandemic that I finally got down. And then it's like, oh man, now what's the rule on this? And then there's practice squads. Like, who can be on the practice squad now and who can't? And, I mean, there are so many rules. I mean, and every team has an army of lawyers to figure this stuff out. And you and I are knuckleheads trying to figure this out, talking about it every day. And so that's the date.
Can you imagine players not having an agent? Like, that just boggles my mind too. Like, have an agent. I mean, you know all the stuff off the back of your hand.
And I know, because I went through this in the music industry as well. And I know some people, you know, agents and managers, and maybe they don't want to go down that road. But when it comes time to negotiate, at least you have to hire a lawyer to sit next to you and make sure that's
the minimum,
right. And then, you know, and even if you're kind of negotiating your own thing. So a lawyer pretty much has to be present. I mean,
involved,
I'm sure it's not going to open up a packet. I hate signing up for anything. People throw a piece of paper in front of you. Go ahead and sign this. I'm like, what am I signing? It's going to take me 3 hours to read this contract. I'm just trying to buy a loaf of bread. What's going on here?
I'm sure, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't just Lamar and his mom signing this $40 million deal. There was somebody else involved, a lawyer of some sort. Last note, I don't want to get too far off all the stuff that's going on this week, but I was almost embarrassed to bring it up. Like, June 1st is like a week from now too, and that's a magic date. But does it matter anymore? Like, I should know this like the back of my hand. Like, June 1st cuts are a thing. But you can already have designated them. Like, that part boggles my mind too.
Yeah, the pre-June 1st designation is an odd one too that happens now. That didn't used to happen before. And so I don't, and there's no like obvious big June 1st stuff this year that I can remember. And I'm
Not
sure
that I know of. Maybe somebody can clue us in on that, but I haven't paid a ton of attention. But
let us know.
I know June 1st is a big day, and I don't know why it's a big day at the moment.
I don't know if there's any other holdouts. I know there's some non-holdouts I want to talk about, guys who are in OTAs. like Tua Tagovailoa. Some quarterback notes. You mentioned Lamar Jackson, where he's at and what he's trying to accomplish this year with his weight, I think is interesting. But anybody else out there, listeners, there's sneaky holdouts, something going on with your squad, let us know at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a comment on YouTube. Let's talk quarterbacks next. Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa on Peacock and Williamson. Today's episode of P&W is sponsored by Yahoo Finance. And when you are young and you're trying to do everything right, maybe you're getting a little bit older and you're starting to realize, oh, you know what? I think I need to take this a little bit more seriously with my investments. And when it comes to your financial future, you've tried already, right? You want to grow that portfolio that you've already been working on, and you've already done it all potentially. You've saved, researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. Even if you're just starting out. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. We're talking about a community of over 90 million users each month at Yahoo Finance. Their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. So for comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. You mentioned Lamar Jackson there. Lamar Jackson's always been a guy, it's like, skinny guy, let's get some weight on this kid. And now he's a grizzled veteran. He's negotiated his big long-term contract, and now he's trying to get skinny again. Matt, what's going on with Lamar Jackson? He said he wanted to be a little bit more agile. He's the fastest quarterback in the NFL, now trying to get faster.
So here's what happened with Lamar, and I think it went a little underreported nationally, is he signed his big deal. And as he was doing that a year ago, he tacked on about 10 to 15 pounds of body armor, muscle and girth. And I've always thought he was a lot stronger than he looks. I always called him wiry, he could break tackles. He's strong, but he's kind of long and wiry. So he added some bulk. And I assume this was a decision between him and the organization, as they're giving him a huge contract, that we want you to play as long as possible. We want you to protect yourself more. We want you to be more of a pocket player. And of course, all the running is still there. And it worked. He won the MVP. And he was probably as good or better from the pocket than he's been at any stage of his career. And he could shrug off the TJ Watson, Myles Garrett's, and Hendrickson's a little bit better and a little more traditional from the pocket player compared to where he was early in his career, of course. Now, I don't know why he's switching. He just had an awesome year. And that always rubs me a little wrong. Like, I'm going to add 10 pounds. I'm going to drop 10 pounds. And I bet, just trying to get in his head, I bet there was times when he thought he could get to the corner and used to get to the corner and couldn't, like he has for every year of his life. You know what I mean? And like, that's not who I am.
Wait a second here. Hold on.
Right.
I like that body armor, but I used to just toast that guy, and I didn't today. Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah. Drop a couple LBs, and I'll blow right past that guy.
I think part of it is just with the athletes, they need something. They need that goal. They need a reason that they're nothing working out. So it's got to be 5-10 pounds one way or the other. There's something that you're trying to do in the offseason. And I think some of it is almost busy work. It's almost like you have to hand out an assignment, right? And it's like, if you're a trainer, it's like, oh, you're perfect, man. You
right.
It's like, oh, well, hold on, let's figure it out. We got to change something with you, and if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, I think is how these guys are wired. So we'll see what it looks like for him and if anything changes, but he was already the most athletic guy in the league, and he'll continue to be the most athletic guy in the league. You don't want him to get too skinny and get hurt, though. So no. I understand where Baltimore was last offseason. He had a great year, too. So don't lose too much weight, Lamar.
So that's a good point. I mean, maybe that's just a trainer getting him a reason to get out of bed and come in and work hard. You know what I mean? Or Lamar gets it in his head that I need a goal every offseason, and I just won the MVP, and I'm really good, and I'm not sure what I need to fix at this point, but I'm sure there's something. It can still – Brady always fine-tuned everything. I do find it interesting, and I hate when common folks like us compare ourselves to athletes like, oh, I tore my rotator cuff. I came back in 6 weeks. Like,
Right.
shut up. Who cares? You have no clue what you're talking about. Or I had a bad knee or my back bothers me. I'm like, shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about compared to these human beings. You're a civilian. But
speaking of, we need that loss of 10 to 15 pounds more than Lamar does. Like, I need to get with that.
That's where I was going with this, though, is I do wonder,
needing to drop 10.
Even though we're almost different species, I mean, these guys, when they get into their 20s, as most of our listeners know, men put on weight. And I wonder how much they resist that. And I mean, that's an off-season trainer conversation that I don't know. But like, the trainers resist that, or do they embrace that, hey, we know you're going to get bigger naturally, you know?
That would be a fun conversation to get
it would be,
actual trainer on here to talk about what that offseason is like for different players around the NFL.
It's an interesting angle that I've never explored, you know?
Yeah.
And you can see that by my body tone.
Right. Yeah. We don't see our trainers enough, Matt. That is
correct.
Tua, he missed some stuff earlier this offseason, but he's at voluntary OTA workouts for the Miami Dolphins in phase 3. So that tells me at least the contract negotiations are going well behind the scenes. Is there any other way to take it?
That's 100% my impression. Is this a very goodwill situation? Talks are going well. We're all rowing the boat in the same way. And Jared Goff just signed a deal, and Miami must think that Tua's right in that neighborhood, and Tua must think he's right in that neighborhood. And let's just, cross some T's and dot some I's and figure out a couple finer points or maybe some incentives or things like that. But I would think a deal gets done very soon. And I get it. I mean, inflation and the salary cap's going up like crazy around the league because it's so successful. But though that tier of quarterback, good players, worries me. I mean, do I want Tua or Goff to be one of the richest quarterbacks in the league? I mean, that's scary to me.
I mean, it's the alternative is just to be bad and have a really bad quarterback. So I don't think teams are willing to go that route, and they love their own guys. But and here's the thing that happens is the beginning of the contract's cheaper anyway than what the numbers are thrown out there originally by the agents. And then by year 3 or 4, there's outs in the contract. So I don't think it's as crazy of as insane as the numbers look. And with the cap going up, I don't think in actuality and how the books are cooked in some cases here in the NFL, I don't think it's that much of an expenditure for teams.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it as well.
I mean, like I was just looking at salary cap stuff. Like Miami has the third amount of salary cap remaining as it stands right now. And next year is really ugly as well. But a Tua deal can help that. You just move money around,
Speaking of not being lawyers, we're not accountants either, but there's only $50 million contracts in the NFL. Nobody ever makes $50 million a year. So at some point, someone's got to actually cash that. But it's like you'll see the real money dollars every year, and it's like, oh, this guy made the most money this year. It's $36 million. It's like, well, wait a second. His contract's $50 million a year, just like 10 other guys. When are they going to start making the $50 million?
So this podcast, we've talked about numbers and accounting. We've talked about lawyers and contracts. We've talked about trainers and getting into good shape. And we've talked about injuries and doctors. Probably the 4 topics I am the worst at. You know what I mean?
Aaron Rodgers has stepped out of his comfort zone when he speaks at times, but he was pretty candid speaking with media at OTAs in New York. And he was talking about the New York market and how kind of like seeing the end of his own career. He was being pretty honest about things and talking about how, look, I better be good because it's I can see the end for me. They're already trying to replace me in Green Bay, and that was a few years ago. So I've got to be good because either I'm out of here and all of us are out of here, talking about, the entire regime potentially riding on his shoulders. So it's a big year for the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers, and it's not like Aaron Rodgers doesn't know that. That was one of my big takeaways, listening to some of the conversations and some of the quotes and some of the interviews from this week.
Yeah, and just from a medical perspective, he has no restrictions, which is great, considering the injury he suffered and his age, but obviously that happened very, very early in the season, like couldn't have happened any earlier. And then the other nuggets I saw from the Jets, so it's a little concerning, but no one's ever going to push anybody at this point, is Vera Tucker and Mike Williams, newly signed, both have not been cleared for activities. Like I thought Williams would be out of the be cleared by now. And
this is kind of the time where you hold guys out if there's any question. It's still early OTAs and involuntary stuff. So if there's any question, guys are not going to be out there.
When in doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some more new faces and new places, including coaches. Some great quotes coming out of Dolphins camp, coming out of Patriots camp about coaches who are no longer there. And a really interesting one out of Las Vegas in the Raiders from Michael Mayer, a really high draft pick last year. The team drafts another even higher tight end this year. Maybe some clues as to why that happened next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by Game Time, a special offer for our listeners at Game Time. If you want to get in on those NFL tickets or really tickets for anything in your area, killer last minute deals at Game Time, all in prices, views from your seat, and of course, their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. And I know you've seen the NFL schedule. You probably circled a few dates where I got to get to this game. You can find those tickets on Game Time, whether it's now or last minute tickets, but you probably need to get in line and get those early if we're talking about NFL tickets. But for some other tickets, maybe a baseball game in your area, we're talking about playoff hockey, playoff basketball, or maybe a concert, comedy show, any theater events near you, you can find those tickets and get killer last minute deals up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater at Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. I want to go to Patriots camp because this is the first time. It's not camp, I guess. It's OTAs, the Patriots activities. This is the first time in 20 years that Bill Belichick's not the one that's running it, that's not coaching this football team. And young pass rusher Keon White had an interesting quote about Bill Belichick not being there. And he said, quote, "We don't have Bill Belichick cussing us out anymore." But he went on to say, not that that's necessarily the best thing. When I first saw that quote, I was like, oh my God, these Bill Belichick wasn't getting through to these young players anymore. And that's why things went the way they went at the end for Bill Belichick. But he said, quote, "I miss him. I like Bill. He's my kind of coach, like a tough guy. I like that. I respond well to things like that. But Mayo's done a pretty good job too. It's just all different." So I thought that was interesting. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I thought that's the direction this was going with Keon White talking about no more Bill Belichick, but he actually missed the hard coaching of a crusty old coach like Bill Belichick. And what's funny is in Dolphins OTAs, veteran safety Javon Holland had this to say about Anthony Weaver taking over as defensive coordinator after Vic Fangio has left now to the Philadelphia Eagles. He said, quote, "It's a complete 180. And quote, "It's the fact that he's a good person that makes a difference." So that one, maybe somebody didn't quite like getting coached by Vic Fangio in Miami last year.
I mean, those are two of the all-time greats at what they did, head coach and defensive coordinator, and they've put some time in, and I do think there's a lot of crustiness involved with both those dudes and some old school ways of doing things. I don't know much more to say about Fangio, but I guess him and that coaching staff didn't get along great, and that was an oil and water situation. From what I understand, Mayo is a very positive, quote, players coach, very hands-on with his guys. Hey, what are you listening to? Blah, 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 which I'm sure Bill was not. That being said, and I don't know if Mayo is a good coach or a bad coach or whatever, or a good hire or not, all that'll be seen. But even that little bit that White said made me think, I don't want to be the guy that follows the guy, because Bill's shadow is going to loom, man.
We just saw with their quarterback situation. The best thing for May is that Mac Jones was that buffer in between Brady. So May is not replacing Brady anymore.
Exactly. Belichick 20 years in that building is going to have every little corner is going to have his fingerprints still on it for a while. And it's just no way around it.
A couple more notes. Speaking of those Philadelphia Eagles and that secondary that Vic Fangio is now coaching with the Eagles, Cooper DeJean is lining up kind of as expected after the draft and how he fell a little bit out of the first round. He is lining up at nickel. And so I think sort of a star type of a role is what we're going to see from Cooper DeJean there. Play a little bit inside. We'll see if he plays more some outside corner at times, some safety at times. But looks like he's starting off as that nickel role, which I think is the perfect role for Cooper DeJean. And they took another corner in round 1 who's going to be their outside guy there. So that's Cooper DeJean, going to play nickel. Love the role for him in that defense in Philly.
Yeah, it sounds like they saw him the same way. We're going to have him all over the place. Palin Ramsey, get him in the slot, near the box, all over the place. Probably play some man against bigger guys, but not just line outside the numbers, like your Deion Sanders. That's not going to be the case.
One more quote that really stood out to me, and this one was from Raiders OTAs. And Michael Mayer, who was a high second-round pick at tight end for the Raiders last year, said about his rookie season, quote, "My mentality is different this year. I've definitely flipped the script. Last year, maybe there were some days I didn't want to come in. It's time to dig down, play some ball, win some ball games." And when you hear a quote like that, you might realize, oh, okay, he didn't want to even come to work as a rookie last year. That's pretty telling, and maybe why the Raiders said, we're not worried about the guy we drafted last year because he might not even be he might not even be wired right for what we're trying to do here, and we're going to draft another tight end this time in the first round. And now they're different guys, and they can play together too. So it's not like they're just throwing last year's second rounder in Michael Mayer away. But honestly, almost too honest there. That I don't know if that's something you want to put out there if you're Michael Mayer, that you didn't even want to come into work.
Yeah, that's not a great sign, obviously. I mean, I think they would have taken Penix if he would have been there. And I guess it came out after the draft that, which I don't believe, that they actually flipped a coin between Arnold, the corner, and Bowers, the tight end, and Bowers got heads and won or whatever. I think that's crazy if they would ever say that, but
fire everybody if that's
right. I'm always I'm a little harder than I should be on Coach Pierce. But he's brutally honest I think he'd handle the media better for his own good sometimes. Like, he just says things that actually happened that don't tell us that. It doesn't make you look so great,
Because we want them to be honest. It's great for us. And then they're honest, and then you're like, oh man, maybe you shouldn't have said that. That's like coaches are so PC. Don't ever say anything, because honesty doesn't actually help you all that much.
And back to Mayer real quick. I mean, none of this was a case of him coming out of Notre Dame. A year ago he's a tough guy. He lives and breathes football, blah, 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 blah. But we saw it like with Kadarius Toney with the Giants. I mean, sometimes after a year, teams will sell them at 80 cents on the dollar. I wonder if somebody could pry Mayer away.
One more note I've got. Now, anything else you have?
I got one little one too. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go to the Tennessee Titans really quick. And Terry McCormick there, who covers the Titans, said he saw more passes thrown in one day yesterday at Titans OTA practices than in an entire week of practices under the previous regime.
Wow.
And so that kind of just shows you how different things might be for the Tennessee Titans. And second-year quarterback, they might be slinging it a little bit, Matt.
Interesting. I mean, they invested in receivers like crazy. I thought Tyler Boyd was even one step further than you needed, after Ridley and all those guys. Invested in the O-line. I mean, Levis is going to have every chance to succeed one way or another. And I forget what podcast I was listening to, but I found it interesting that they were talking about the Bengals offense. The way the Bengals play offense is Burrow in the shotgun, reading things out in a Peyton Manning-like style, a ton of 11 personnel, 3 receivers on the field, mental processing. And I kind of thought, that doesn't seem like Levis to me. Frankly, it sounds more like Mason Rudolph, who they signed as the backup, than it does Levis. Him and Burrow aren't very similar.
Last note, Matt, what do you got?
Oh, TJ Hawkinson. I mean, I think everyone realized he was injured, and that was a Christmas Eve game that he was injured. But he was on NFL Network and said he wouldn't even commit to being ready for the Week 5 game when they go to London. Like, I mean, that's a bad injury, major knee surgery. It's one of those bad ones too.
I saw the breakdown of this, and it was multiple ligaments too. It wasn't just the ACL, right? There was something else involved.
Right.
But time frame wise, and this happened. You said it happened in January, right?
Christmas Eve is the day that it got injured.
Christmas Eve. And then I think maybe it might have been January once the surgery finally happened.
Yeah.
And so you look at normal time frames, and even on the earliest time frames, like maybe mid-season. Is like you should not expect TJ Hawkinson's going to be playing football, for your fantasy teams. I think where a lot of them report, like a lot of people really care about it. You don't expect him to play in the first half of the season at all. And you might be talking about November, December before you actually hit that, 10, 11, 12 month range where you want players to be before they're really back and able to play.
No, that's where I was going with it too. Is this sounds like a potential wasted year, in his career. I mean, by then, is he going to be the same when he gets back? Where the Vikings going to be at that point? It's a shame. Yeah.
And if you're in the playoffs, he'll be back by then, most likely, but he might not help you get to the playoffs.
Right. But yeah, that's a big loss to be missing for most of the year.
Phase 3, I love it. We got players on the field. We got practices. We got all kinds of news around the league. Let us know what we missed. If there's something happening you think is a bigger deal and people aren't paying attention to it, let us know at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Get those mailbag questions in for next week early if you want. You can always drop a comment or a question on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe there and everywhere you listen to this podcast. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.